So with 1986's The Legend of Zelda flying off the shelves and opening up the world to the potential of action-adventure games, Nintendo obviously knew that they were on a hot streak with Mario and now Zelda. This has to mean they'll take what they learned from Zelda 1 and reinvent that specific style to improve where it failed, so that way we can have an overall perfect sequel, right? Let's take a look at Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Now, despite how this video began, it's important to understand that the steps that Nintendo needed to take are only easily apparent in retrospect. Back in the 80s, I could find it arguable that using the same formula twice in a row is a quick way to fade into obscurity, especially with what went down with Super Mario Bros. 2, or at least how we Westerners call it, the Lost Levels. But I want to make it clear, I don't think reinventing the formula into something new was the wrong choice. I just think the direction they took with that new formula is why this game didn't have the greater impact than the first game did, leading The Adventure of Link to be known as the black sheep of the franchise. Zelda 2 is a very different game than Zelda 1, the first being a top-down viewed action-adventure game that focuses on intense exploration and discovery in order to progress, and the other being a 2D side-scrolling action platformer RPG. And this doesn't go just for battles. While the overworld is reminiscent of the first game's top-down view, the rest of the world, that being in battles, palaces, and within towns, we're stuck within the 2D plane. And yes, I did say towns. There are actual towns in this game now. You think that may have been a given in the first game, as it is a kingdom? You think there's no towns in this kingdom at all? Who is Zelda the princess of? The dirt? Those trees? That suspicious hole in the wall? Yes, it's good to have NPCs this time around, as it does a decent job at providing a different vibe for this game. While the first game felt cold and alone in a dangerous kingdom, while this Hyrule honestly feels, well, even more dangerous, a bit of the edge is taken off when you get into towns and talk with NPCs. But before that, taking a step back to a moment ago when I said this Hyrule is more dangerous, by that, I meant this game is really hard. Like, there will be moments where you will feel legitimate pain because of how brutal this game is. But when talking about Zelda 2 difficulty, I feel I don't want to go with the trends and just say that it's an early NES game, so of course it's hard. But there are reasons as to why Zelda 1 and even Mario 1 before it all came out before this game and are nowhere near as difficult. I know Zelda 1 can be a bit aimless, but at least all of the biggest issues of that game can be overcome just by simply exploring. In Zelda 2, you have to march on as a sentinel throughout narrow corridors and dungeons, deal with evil enemy placements, classic old-fashioned knockback, on top of an extremely brutal life system. If I'm honest, there are two minute things that would make this game 100 times less frustrating without eliminating the challenge. And that's when getting a game over, you respawn at the beginning of the dungeon you're in. In every dungeon, not just randomly at the end of the game. Sorry. I'm emphasizing this primarily because it's not like this for 99% of the game. If you get a game over, you get sent all the way back at the Northern Palace, meaning you have to fight and survive a trek on the overworld all the way back to where you were, wherever that may have been, near or far, and it is simply painful. I just don't understand what was the point of this level of punishment. If we respawned at the beginning of the dungeon, we'd still have to do the whole dungeon, but making us start from where the game began is just unbelievably cruel to the point it's just not fun. Especially later on in the game, I promise that you will not be at full HP when getting back to the temple. The other small change I'd make is eliminating the life system. Game overs and lives are simply outdated mechanics of the arcade era of games, so this may have made sense back then, but when you take a look at it in retrospect, for a home console game, why include a life system? A person only pays for the game once. Lives were designed to limit how long a player in an arcade would be able to play, encouraging them to spend more change on the game. But for a home console where pre-established punishments are already in place, it makes less sense to add more artificial difficulty on top of it. I said there were only two things I would change, so I'll leave it at that, and instead change the topic of what makes the one thing I feel most would agree is the best part of this game: the tight, anxiety-inducing combat. The combat of Zelda 2 I feel is one of the few understandable reasons to go back to this game. Despite everything I said, it truly is exhilarating. So to touch that topic, let's talk about Link's moveset and capabilities this time around. Link isn't as robust this time around, as he's simply locked to using sword and shield, but just like the first game, at full health, Link can attack with the sword beam. Unfortunately though, Link's sword is small, it might as well be a butter knife. I mean seriously, I don't know why this man thought it was okay to set off on a journey with this. If anything, it looks like he's ready to get in the kitchen and fix some breakfast, because fighting enemies with a weapon that's basically a kitchen utensil will feel like you're naturally at a disadvantage against foes. This makes you have to dive right into the combat of this game. You can't play pretty here, you can't be stylish, nothing like that. You actually have to duke it out with enemies, and honestly, this is part of what makes a fight so engaging in this game, since it feels like you're in a duel with your foes. But being so close to enemies constantly is part of what makes this game harder because of how aggressive every enemy in this freaking game is. Making this even more challenging though, there are no recovery arts. Meaning if you want to heal, especially when you want to get the sword beam back, you have to use either life magic, find a fairy or heart container, talk to the women in red in the towns, and leveling up. Yeah, leveling up in a Zelda game. Even to this day, this was never done in the traditional sense again. But in this game, when you defeat enemies and gain XP for your level up, you can choose to level up your health, magic, or attack. Magic is very effective in this game, some to the point of feeling like it's nearly impossible to play this game without it. In this game, Link has access to shield, which makes you take half damage temporarily and it's the best one in the game. Jump, which doubles your regular jump height. Life, which we said earlier, will let you recover more HP. Fairy, which turns Link into a fairy, which sounds weirder than it is, since it's mainly used to reach higher places and go through locked doors. A little bit strange, they could have gone with another direction with this, but it's not like it really hurts anything. The fire spell lets you shoot out fireballs from your sword. The reflect spell counters strong projectile attacks. This would have been great in Zelda 1, by the way. The spell, yes, I said that right. There's a spell called spell in this game, thanks Nintendo. But it turns enemies into bot slimes for some reason. And lastly, the thunder spell is basically a screen nuke. But outside of magic, there's more to Link than just his magic. In his arsenal, he also has items that can help him further explore the overworld, like the hammer and flute, that basically just let him open up new parts of the map. The candle will let you see inside dark caves. The magical key will let you open up any locked door in the game. The cross lets Link see invisible enemies. Yes, there are invisible enemies in this game. The handy glove lets Link break blocks inside dungeons. And the boots and raft are used to get to normally inaccessible areas. This game offers a lot and offers what was introduced in Zelda 1 in more parts of the game. However, these steps forward feel so great to embrace, but that's why it hurts so much to see multiple steps back too. I love how much more fleshed out Hyrule feels this time, but I hate that there are random encounters in the overworld that are practically impossible to reliably avoid, which isn't a smart idea as more battles means more XP, which makes you have an easier time, but having to grind in games just isn't my thing. It's one thing if it's fun to grind in the game, but Zelda 2 is already a frustrating mess playing normally. One of the best reasons to come back to this game is for the Dark Link fight though. It's such an epic fight. He's got all of your moves, so it really reinforces the feeling of having come so far in this adventure, and now the last thing to overcome in order to earn the Triforce of Courage is to conquer your shadow. This was brilliantly done. I know you can cheese this fight like crazy, and honestly I couldn't blame you after dealing with the Great Palace, but if you fight him fair and square, it's a very, very great time. Just don't lose to him or you gotta fight Thunderbird again. Anything but that. But this leads to something I just really need to get off my chest. I'm sorry. I know I'm just getting started with retrospectives and video analysis on video games, but this is definitely a low point for me. I know I didn't go over the full ins and outs of everything, but if I'm honest, I don't really care to for this game. The game just isn't too much fun to boot up and play for me today. It had been well over a decade since I played the game last, and honestly, I feel I remember why I haven't replayed it now. I'm a very give credit where it's due kind of guy, so I acknowledge the strength this game has. I can even agree that some of the things that I said that I didn't like about this game may be reasons why you like this game, and that's fine. Honestly, I just hate being negative this much in a video. I don't want to come across as someone who can't see the glass as half full, but I won't dance around how it felt playing this game again, especially since there were many points I just wanted to stop playing. But the best thing about finishing this is that the worst is over now. After the release of Zelda 2, Nintendo decided to take a step back and rethink what made people love Zelda 1 so much, and what they could dissect from Zelda 2 that made it an evolution of the first game. Doing so would require determining what things players didn't like, and for the next mainline Zelda game, Nintendo decided they were gonna hit it out of the park. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was a game for years people didn't know how Nintendo was gonna top, and it's still regarded as the best 2D game in the series. It has an extremely active speedrunning scene even now in 2021. I think it's safe to say The Legend of Zelda was just getting started, and it's only skyward from here.